Hi everybody, my name is Holly Rabinski. This is my older adult oral video presentation. My presentation is on my mother. I also chose the identity versus identity confusion stage of Erickson, which is around 12 to 20 years old, which is an adolescent that is moving into adulthood, developing values and goals, seeking out who they are, trying to identify who they are, where they're going. If they are successful in this stage, they will develop a strong sense of self. All right, so basically, this interview was, like I said, with my mom. It was pretty eye-opening for me. So many things that I didn't know that she had been through. So to keep it on this stage, this adolescent stage, around 12 to 20 years old, prior to being 12, my mom and her family lived in the city of Wilmington. They actually resided in two separate houses because my grandmother had they had 8 children. My grandmother was pregnant 14 times. Only 8 of them survived. But because the houses there were small, they sent my mom to live across the street with her aunt. Now at 12, my grandpa bought a new house in another area that had enough bedrooms for everyone. So at this point, everyone moves in together. Prior to that, my mom, I guess, was what she called her father's punching bag. Apparently no one else was beaten except for my grandmom and my mom. So she would wake up, she said, and my grandpa would be, hitting her out of her sleep. When they moved to this new house, he started to hit her with a fist, as opposed to, I guess, a belt. She said a belt or the belt buckle and things like that. She recalls it beginning around first grade or earlier. She says she's not sure because she doesn't remember prior to that age. I do know that before they lived all together, when they lived separately, her sister Mary and her lived with the aunt. Well, Mary was taken at 6 months old to live with the aunt. So it wasn't until she was 12 that she lived with the rest of the family. What happened with my mom and this particular sister was whenever that sister did something wrong, my mom was the one who got punished for that action. So a story she told me was that during they went to a dance and they came home late, and he grounded my mom for 2 weeks. And so the next weekend, the sister goes out and is late and comes back, and he asks why, and she says they went out to eat, and he grounded my mom for 2 more weeks. So she ran away. She was tired of being, the dad's punching bag and always taking the fall for the sister, and she would try to save the grandmom from her husband, the grandpa. So he, I guess when she ran away, she went to an aunt's, and the aunt called her dad, and he came back and got her. Now, so a couple of years goes by. At 16, she runs away again to her elder sister's home. The eldest sister had married and was with her husband, living somewhere else. At that point, there was a like a social, they started to go to counseling at Catholic Charities or somewhere like that. And it was recommended that they go to court because my mom was not safe in the home. He, rather than going to court and having things on paper, just said it's fine, she can stay there. Now, at 16, the father gets a job in St. Louis, and my mom wasn't supposed to go with them, but because there was no formal court order in place, he made her go. So she gets to St. Louis. Mind you, she is struggling with, already with making friends. She claims that she's had trouble making friends her whole life. She never felt a part of, she said, never felt like she was a part of the family, which is quite understandable. So when she went to this new school, her younger sister's there and has all these friends, and my mom says that she didn't know not one person in the school, and she quit. So upon her quitting, she ended up returning and running away back to Delaware with her other sister, Carol. So this is like basically just all in this stage of her life. There was some other incidences where she stated that during that time, she, in Missouri, that her father shot a gun at her, a shotgun, 3 different times. The police were called by neighbors, and when they got to the police headquarters, he asked the cop to give him his gun so he could finish the job. Now, my mom's telling me this, and I recorded all of this, but, she starts to cry, and, it was really heartbreaking to hear that she had went through all these things and had hidden them from me. Perhaps this is why you're supposed to interview someone that's not related to you. But some things that occurred and came from this would be that she was pretty resilient and successfully escaped her father after some time. However, she did not develop a strong sense of self and has since suffered with depression and low self-esteem. She's ended up on medication. She's, like I said, 71 now. She's been addicted to prescription pain medication for years and is just now weaning off of that as in the present moment. But for the past 20 years, she's been on Oxycontin, a very high dose, Xanax, and many other things. She entered into an abusive marriage with my father. I think that what it looks like is that it was really the escape from her father, because he asked her to marry him a week after she left St. Louis. So this appears to be an out. He was in the Coast Guard and became a fireman and was pretty successful. She talked about how, they got married and they lived with his mother for a little while, and then bought their own house. But he was emotionally abusive, and they would argue constantly. Nothing physical, but extreme emotional abuse on both parts from them. Addiction and mental illness issues arose for my mother. And then she passed a lot of those same things on to her children. Her daughter, Melissa, entered into a relationship with a controlling man who eventually destroyed her life and left her, and she drank herself to death and died in February. Her other child, which would be myself, has also suffered with addiction issues. My mother was pretty abusive, like physically, as well as mentally to myself, and I've noticed with my children. So all of her struggles with her father and her family have passed on to everyone thereafter. So with the psychosocial crisis resolution, one must find their identity or sense of self in this stage. They need to know who they are and what they want out of life. Success develops fidelity. So that is saying that your ability to form relationships and bonds with other people, whereas she stated specifically that she was unable to do that with her when she was in St. Louis. And so she chose to leave the school that she was at. If she had possibly been successful in identifying like what she wanted out of her life, perhaps there would have been, things would have went a different way. She told me the next day after we did this interview that she realized that she's traded her father for her husband, which would be my father. Different factors or events that inhibited the resolution of this would be that she was never given the ability to find herself. Seems that she accepted a marriage as a way out of her current situation. Moving in with the entire family when they were placed all together caused a lot of issues for my mother because of her sisters. Everyone else seemed to be more important than my mom. She received all the punishments. She was the one abused. She had no skills when she dropped out of school. She seems to have been extremely traumatized from everything that occurred with her father, and she's never received any treatment for these issues. I believe that she hid those in having a family and raising her children and put her all into the children that she has, and then very codependent as well. If she doesn't have someone to save or to help, she becomes extremely depressed. And she isolates at her house most days and sleeps all day and stays up all night. So none of these issues have ever been, faced or worked on. My mom was beaten from a very early age, and that continued into her teens. She's never recovered from her abuse. So the interviewee was also raised by a Roman Catholic family, and she was taught to marry and have children. So these situations, I believe, were a cause for her to believe she needed to stay in her marriage. She was also very financially dependent upon my father because she never had developed her own sense of self and did work for herself. She had lots of physical ailments that came up later in life. Neck surgery. She had something that happened with her wrist when she was around 20, so she couldn't work then. Constantly having, chronic health issues throughout her life, rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia, you name it, there's been something that has always happened to keep her stuck in this relationship. Another theory would